I just want to ask a few questions before go, and then after that, maybe we all can join hands and pray for you and many others as well who may be going through that. One of the things that I want to ask you is that you have three different types of diagnosis: mass depression, GAD, and OCD. You know, all these are three-letter acronyms, and many people in church, and let's not talk about just church alone, even outside the church as well. People are not very familiar with this because I don't know how many percent of the population in Malaysia are struggling with this kind of issues, but there are even more things like, for instance, I don't know whether you've heard of persistent depressive disorder. There is borderline personality disorder, and so many other three-letter acronyms in terms of mental health and so on. So my question is, where do you go and seek for help? You mentioned just now that people who had OCD, they were not qualified to treat you. And I think OCD is one of the most common mental health. If they are not qualified to treat OCD, and how else are we going to go to seek treatment for mass depression, for GAD, BPD, and PDD, and how are we going to get treatment for the others?
Well, that's actually a very good question. So I want to caveat. I want to say it really honestly. Malaysia isn't exactly the best in terms of mental health care. People who have mental disorders find it very hard, right? So I know I mentioned I wouldn't go into the statistics, right? But I've had quite a number of friends who have told me that they didn't get a proper treatment plan until at least a year later. So they sifted through therapists, counselors, psychologists, psychiatrists for one whole year. Then only they found the right person, right? The person with the right qualifications. So for me, in my case, I struggle with OCD, right? And it is common, but not actually as common as people would think. Clinical diagnoses of OCD is actually globally, right? It only is found to affect only 1 to 3% of the population in the world, right? This is according to WHO, right? WHO, which is World Health Organization. So 1 to 3% of the population globally. And if you think about it, that's nothing compared to depression. Depression is 5% globally, right? And as people would understand, it's one of the leading causes of suicide. So that's why people are like, okay, depression is important, right? But with all of these treatment plans and all that, for OCD in particular, you have to find someone who is qualified to do ERP. Now, acronym, right? ERP is Exposure Response Prevention, which means for people with OCD like me, we get scared and a thought comes in our head and we're like, okay, because this thought is in my head, it has to be true. So, for example, I walk past a table and I think, oh, I must have grazed around the table and now I'm dirty. So because I've thought that, it becomes true. So what do? I take my sanitizer, I take my soap or whatever, right? And so ERP is the process of stopping that. You've exposed yourself to this fear, but you're going to stop a response. You're going to prevent the response. And you're going to train your brain to think, okay, actually, I'm okay, right? And so it's a very broad question, unfortunately, but different people have different treatments that they need, right? Depending on the mental illness. But in Malaysia, I'd be very careful to say, go to this person. He's the best, right? But a few places that I've gone to that have been helpful to me would be the Mind Faculty, which is in Damansara, I believe, or PJ, that site. So the Mind Faculty is a bit pricey, but I would think that they are one of the institutions that are the most qualified in Malaysia, right? The Mind Faculty. So that's number one. But again, of course, if you go there and you don't feel too comfortable, that's okay, right? It doesn't mean like, oh, this is my only shot. Like you can go to other hospitals and other clinics. That's totally fine. But yeah, so that was one that I found helpful. Another one would be this counselor, right? A therapist by the name of Dr. Teo. And she is a therapist, so she's not qualified for very extensive behavioral therapy and all the more complicated situations. But her name is Dr. Teo, and she is in Luther Center in PJ, right? Everybody goes to PJ, but that's another place. There's a question in the chat that says, is the Mind faculty Christian? No, it's not. But I think that's okay. That's where the idea of, in Christian terms, we think of it as common grace, right? These are gifts from God, right? Even though they're not Christian, they're there to help, right? Even with hospitals, food clinics and restaurants and all that, these are gifts, right? It doesn't have to be Christian, but these are things that help you take care of your body and take care of your mind and stuff like that. So yeah, it's not Christian, but it's still very helpful. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Luke. I'll be moderating this session together with my co-moderator, Hannah Park. Before I pass the time over to Hannah, and also we'll go through some of the questions from the audience tonight. We have 23 questions, so it's going to be quite a challenge to go through all that because we got to end at 10 p.m. But just before that, I want to ask you, you mentioned just now that you attempted suicide twice. I just want to ask you, what was going on in your mind at that time when you attempted suicide, and what should be the people around you, how they can help someone who's at the moment of attempting to commit suicide, and even after attempting to commit suicide, how can we help the person?
Very good question. So at the age of 7 to 8, I attempted suicide by going to the top floor of my mom's shop. So I went to the top floor and I wanted to jump. And the thoughts that were running through my head was not of myself. Partially it was about myself, but it was more for my family. You see, we were all struggling with with financial issues, right? So we had very little to go around, right? What you ate for breakfast was what you ate for lunch, which was what you ate for dinner. And then if you portioned it out well, it was what you ate for the morning after. That was what we grew up with. And so my thought was, I'm so tired of working. I'm so tired of my siblings working to make ends meet and have food on the table. So if I died, my siblings would have one less mouth to feed, right? One less body to clothe, right? And that was the whole idea in my head, because I thought, okay, I want to, just finish this so I don't have to feel pain and my family can be a little bit more comfortable in terms of finances. Who are the people that should be around us? People, it's very hard to give a group of people, but I can give the characteristics of the people that should be around. The type of people should be gentle, willing to learn, and willing to help. Those are the three things that I would say has to be there. I mean, if you're a Christian, that's great, right? We love Christians, but a Christian has to be these three, right? Gentle, willing to learn, and willing to help. So whether that's a pastor or a cell group leader or your friend or, the uncle at the Chinese shop, I don't know, right? It has to be those three characteristics. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Luke. Hannah is actually a qualified counselor. Hannah, you want to ask any questions to Luke?
Good questions in the slide though. So would you like to answer that? So if you can keep it as comprehensive and as simple as possible, that would be great. Right. Okay. The first question is, I'm going to start, Uncle. Can I? The
Yeah,
first question is,
yeah,
how
go ahead.
does OCD relates genetics, and what is the best way you have found to deal with your intrusive thoughts?
Yeah. So OCD is actually related from genetics. So there is a scientific paper from Johns Hopkins University. And this guy, his name is Dr. Gerald, he found 3 genes that are linked to the occurrence of OCD, right? And there are like letters and numbers in the gene, right? But mainly it affects your serotonin and your dopamine. So in your body, serotonin is how you sort of regulate your mood, right? Your stress levels, everything. And dopamine is your happy pathways, right? That tells you, hey, do it again, do it again, do it again. So those are the genes that are affected. But many of the articles that I've seen actually show that there are a lot more genetic influences, whether it's mutations or lack of genetic markers, right? All of that actually do contribute to OCD happening in a person, being diagnosed with OCD. Yeah, so it's quite prominent. Yeah. What is the best way you have found to deal with your intrusive thoughts? Talking to my sisters and also working on ERP. That's been really helpful for me. So ERP is the therapy that I mentioned before. So that's what I would say. Yeah.
Great.
think-
Hmm,
Hannah, I think the second question Luke has already answered. You might
Yeah.
want to skip to the third one.
yeah. Okay, you mentioned about OCD. Maybe just a question. Is there a cure for OCD?
Yes and no.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why I say that is because you would think that it's something that can be cured. I mean, Jesus can do anything, right? There's promises and all that, but there are passages and passages of scripture that show that God allows you to struggle with that throughout your life. So is there a cure for OCD? Is there a cure for mental illness? There's no magic pill that I know of. But that doesn't mean that God can't work miracles. But the main idea is, trust in God, but don't put on your hope on this one cure. And then if your cure doesn't work, then you're going to cry yourself to sleep, right? No, it's a mixture of both. So you have to be careful with that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Next, do you think supporting your friends, being a caregiver, contributed to your mental health worsening?
I would say yes. And this is where you have to be careful, because I think a lot of us go to 2 different extremes. One is, oh, I'm going to help you as much as I can. And then the other one is, I need to take care of me, #self-care kind of thing. So you have to be careful not to go into 2 different extremes. For me, I kind of went to the caregiver extreme. But I think it's always good to not only set healthy boundaries, but also help people who are struggling. So it's a give and take. You gotta be in a community. Yeah.
Right. So what I'm hearing is that if there is healthy boundary, then it's possible to not have your mental health worsen.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Next one. Is there an unhealthy standardization of one's environmental upbringing, and what effect does it have on how society shapes how we perceive mental illness? It's a long question. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this is a very scholarly question.
Yeah.
I would think yes. For the first part, right? The unhealthy standardization is everyone's upbringing kind of contributes to it. So it's like we sort of, to make it simple, we kind of group people up together, right? So mental illness, everyone's mental illness, right? That kind of thing. What effects does it have on how society shapes how we perceive mental illness? Again, like we just kind of group them all together and then think that because they're all in one group, we treat them all the same, right? Everyone gets the same pill, the same words, the same scripture, and then that's it. But I think it's much more complicated than that. It's never as simple as we think. So yeah, I would think that's something. I hope I answered the question. It's very scholarly, but yeah.
Right. And a more personal question to you, like, has your pain ever made you resentful to God? As in why he would let you go through this?
Oh yeah.
Mhm.
All the time. It's
Mm.
it okay, so for me, I think that when you are resentful to God and all that, bring that to God, and that can help you resolve that resentful and that bitterness in your heart, right? Because if you have pain and you're like, okay, I don't want to deal with God, but that's gonna just make the gap even bigger, right? But if you use that resentment and you go to God, like, God, Nani, right? Like, I don't understand why you're doing this. Why did I get OCD? Why, all of that, right? And so bring it to God. And I think there are many instances in scripture where people actually do that, right? In the Psalms, you see that, like, you can bring your resentment to God. And I think that was a privilege that I had, right? I could bring that resentment to God. So to be really honest, I've said bad words to God in prayer, right? But of course, I've said sorry to God about that. But I mean, so the main idea is you want to bring it as honestly as you can to God. So yes, it has made me resentful, but I'm still working on that. Yeah.
In a way, it brings you closer instead of running away from God, lah.
Yeah. So it sort of resolves that tension. Yeah.
Right. Okay, the next question, maybe I summarize it. Like, why is it so common, mental health condition among people, among youth or people around you? Why is it so common?
Yes. Okay, if you think about it, it really makes sense. Here's why. When you look at history, right? In the beginning, you have maybe a few pandemics, a few wars to worry about, right? Yes, that's scarring and there's a lot of trauma, but that's what you have to deal with. But as time unfolds, you have more stress, more wars, more diseases, more pandemics, more like a financial inflation and everything. And that contributes, right? So it makes sense that as time progresses, things are going to get more complicated. More mental illnesses will come about and all that. And also, I hate to be the guy who says this, but like when you're exposed to so much info, you will be more stressed, right? Because you hear of one guy in America who has, some crazy tragedy, and then you think, oh, what about me, right? Back then they only use smoke signals or whatever, right? But the main idea is now we have this overload of info, and that contributes to your mental health, right?
Yeah, the more we know, right?
Yeah, and I just add a little bit more.
Go ahead.
I think another thing also would be generation, or generational stress, in which my parents were bad to me in this way, so I am bad to you. And there's like that added on through the generations and all that. And it's very hard for you to stop it, right?
Yeah.
You're like, okay, no, my father did this to me. I'm not going to do this to you, because you will do something else. And it will just keep on rippling across the generations. So intergeneration. Yes. Thank you, Eileen. Yes. Intergenerational trauma. Yeah.
Okay, I move on.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Okay, they ask you your treatment plan. So is it ERP and family support? Is that how your treatment plan is right now?
Yes. So I do ERP. I also have family support. I also take medication as well. Yeah.
Okay. The next one.
Leo, can I just jump in there? So you are being treated for all three at one time, or because you got three diagnoses, right?
Yeah. So it's a bit, so like I said, it's a bit complicated. So the medication that I get is actually for OCD. So it's not necessarily one that will fix all of them, but this is the most prominent thing that I'm struggling with. So that's why we're treating it with medication. And the others are kind of working alongside that. So yeah.
So there is no specific treatment for GAD and mass depression?
There is. So for GAD, it would be a form of CBT. And so many different types of therapy sort of methods are out there. It's just for me, because my OCD is very uncontrolled, right? That's why I have to do ERP instead of other forms of CBT like ACT and all the other acronyms as well. Yeah.
Yeah, so sorry. CBT means a criminal breach of trust to me. I think it means something else to you.
No. So CBT is cognitive behavioral therapy. Yeah. So it's therapy for your mind, cognitive, and also your behavior, how you react to things. Yeah.
Okay, over to you, Hannah.
Right. Would you want to address the first question, Uncle Pratap?
Oh yeah, I think the question on demonic possession is more theological, but so we don't want to go into theology on that. So have you ever felt that there could be some kind of a spiritual element to the challenge that you're going through? Without going too much into the theology, have you sensed some kind of spiritual attack?
I think it's very difficult when we use the word spiritual attack. No, but I understand what you mean. Sorry. I would think yes, but that's the same thing with a lot of daily life activities. So for us in Malaysia, we love food, right? But we look in scripture, it talks a lot about gluttony, which is crazy, right? We also talk a lot about gossip, right? In church, we kind of gossip quite a bit, right? And so all of these, there's a lot of interlinks, right? It's a big web of spiritual influences and also environmental, social, medical, right? Physiological, right? Your body, your hormones, all the kind of things. So I would think, yes, there is a demonic element, but you want to be careful when you're only focusing on one specific part of it. Yeah. So you want to be careful with that.
Right. Okay. Now the next one is this, like it is a taboo, talking about mental health and everything. And that is why people, within our family, we don't tell someone like, I think you are these people be hurt. So in this case, do you have any experience, telling someone that I think you are showing symptoms of depression? Do you want to see a doctor? It can be something that taboo to tell that. So how to communicate these to them, like be it any mental illnesses?
Okay, so good question. A lot of people actually struggle with this from my experience with my friends and family members. You want to be careful because I think a lot of us have different roles to play. So when you communicate as a family member, you communicate as a family member. So you don't become a doctor and say, I know you have mental illness and I know that you have to take this type of medication, that kind like that's not your unless you're a doctor, but that's not your prerogative, right? You want to be careful with that. So the first thing is you want to say, again, gently, right? You say, hey, I noticed something has been going on in your behavior or in your life. And I think maybe it would be good if we talk to a doctor, right? A psychologist, a psychiatrist, right? I'm not saying you're crazy. I'm not saying you're weird or whatever, but I just care about you and I want you to get better. I want you to get help, right? And so just going with them, and that's a key, right? Don't tell them, go for therapy and then leave them. Go with them as well, right? Drive them over, help them with the finances or the meds. Meds are expensive. So provide some financial support. Yeah, I think that would be great.
Right. Might add also, sometimes we can say things like, oh, I know someone who goes through the same thing with you. What that person did was, he went this and this. Maybe you want to try, instead of cornering that person to, go and see a doctor. Like that is obviously something wrong with you. I think there's a gentle approach to it and a more sensible way to get around it. Right. Yeah. Thank you. Okay, another therapy that is also another acronym. So EMDR, eye eye movement desensitization, I think something. So
Yeah.
is it helpful with someone with OCD or and personality disorder? Do you know anything of it?
Yeah. So this
Hmm.
book, which is actually very popular, so maybe that's where this came from. It's by Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, who wrote The Body Keeps a Score. So this is more towards dealing with trauma. So people with PTSD and stuff like that. So in a sense, it can relate to personality disorder,
Mm.
depending on the type. But when looking at OCD, EMDR doesn't necessarily help, because EMDR focuses on how you deal with, if I remember correctly, I read it a long time ago, but if I remember correctly, it deals with um, sort of bringing yourself back from the emotional and instinctive responses to trauma and triggers, and then bringing it back to the present. And there's like a process of doing that. But for OCD, it's not based on the past because it's what you're used to doing right now, right? So you've built a habit more so. So you want to stop the habit in that sense for OCD. But for personality disorders, yes, it is possible to be helpful. But be careful, right? Don't just read it and like, okay, I know how to do it. Let's go. Like make sure you want to be careful what that is. Yeah.
Right. Don't play the doctor lah. Let the doctor
Yes.
do their
Doctor.
work.
Yes.
Mhm.
Very important. Yeah.
Okay, then could OCD be linked to childhood trauma? I think you mentioned before.
It
It is
can be.
a
Yeah.
lot. Right.
Yeah.
Maybe we move on to the next question. So, what are some resources that you recommend to understand and know more about OCD or other mental illnesses? Any books that inspire you that you want to share?
Yes. Very good question.
Hmm.
There are a couple. The first one would be a website, ccef.org. That one has all kinds of resources, which is amazing.
Hmm.
More specifically, I would suggest listening to Ed Welsh, who talks a lot about depression and anxiety, which seems to be more common nowadays. So Dr. Ed Welsh. So that's WELCH, right? I'll type it in the chat.
And this is on YouTube or
Yes,
podcast?
so you can find it on
YouTube.
YouTube. They have a Spotify podcast as well.
Hmm.
So that one is CCEF podcast. And so that's a good place to get started. Their books are, pretty cheap, quite affordable. They have a journal. They have, I would say, conferences as well that you can download as well. Really good stuff. Yeah. So that would be a good place. A book that I personally enjoyed for OCD was this title. Oh, I forgot the author. I'm so sorry. But the title is Be Still. And it's related to OCD, right? Yeah. So that was a book that really helped me. Yeah.
Right. And the next question sounds simple, but you mentioned you had 3 panic attack, not easy, and then now that it's almost over, how are you doing?
It's a very sweet question. How am I? To be very honest, tired.
Fair enough.
Yeah, and I think a lot of us, so this is where I'm gonna tell you guys honestly, right? After this talk, you guys are gonna go home, or you guys are already at home. You guys are gonna switch off. You guys are gonna go sleep. You guys are gonna, probably forget in the next 5 minutes. But for me, I switch off this Zoom meeting and I still have to clean. I still have to deal with anxiety attacks. I still have to deal with all the kind of stress that comes. So if you ask me, how am I honestly, I'm just really tired. Yeah. But I'm still trusting the Lord day by day. And I'm waiting for when he calls me home.
Awesome. We try to end at 10. Okay.
Can I just follow up with that? Luke, yeah, we've got to end soon. It's already 9:54. We've just maybe we've got one question, Hannah, and then after that I will close it. Yeah.
Okay, maybe the next question. Having 3 disorders like you, I think Okay. What is a good way to manage one's condition without Christian advice, like you mentioned, and without giving up on life?
Oh man. Well, first off, I want to say thank you for being honest. Having 3 disorders is a lot to deal with.
Mhm.
What is a good way to manage one's condition without? Yeah. I think one thing would be taking small steps, right? So I think when we say manage one's condition, you're expected to finish everything and get everything sorted and everything is okay. But I want to show you guys something. I hope this is okay. There's a painting behind me, which my sister was amazing at painting, by the way. My sister painted this. I don't know if you can read it. It says, I don't know if you can see it. Yeah, okay, never mind. But it says breathe through the chaos. And that's the main idea that I do every day. Because there's always gonna be chaos, whether it's stress, anxiety disorders, depression, whatever, there's always gonna be chaos, right? But the main idea is you breathe through it. You take your time, stay slow, slowly build on it, right? And try and find ways that you can cope. Different methods of coping help different people. For some people, you need deep breathing. Other people would be mindfulness, which is okay. It's not bad or unbiblical. Mindfulness is fine, right? But so all of these different things, right? That's where you want to be careful, but slowly take your time, right? To find ways that help manage it, right? I hope, right, for you, if you are struggling and all that, I hope that you have a professional with you, right? A therapist or someone that can help you navigate through how to manage your 3 disorders. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Luke, for the answer. Yeah, passing it back to you, Uncle Pratap.
Yeah, Luke, really appreciate your sharing and your slide and your insights, because usually we get this kind of views from therapists and professionals, which is very good and useful as well, because they come from a perspective of knowledge and experience. But really good to hear from the other side, from someone who's actually going through it and trying to have just a small peek into the mind of someone with mental health issues. You started this entire presentation by saying that you just today itself, you had 3 panic attacks. It must be certainly very painful, and I think it'll be good to end it there as well. By just one final question before we go into prayer, and we really hope that we will keep you in prayer and many more people who are suffering. My question is this: when you had those 3 panic attacks in just today itself, what is the best way for caregivers to attend to you and help you? Should they leave you alone? What if you during having that panic attacks, did you attempted self-harm? What should caregivers do during the time?
So again, good question. I think it's I would still think it's a bit broad, because the way I respond to anxiety is different from how other people would respond to anxiety. So some people would self-harm. For me, I tend to just get really anxious and just really tense, and like everything would just shut down for me. But I think when you're a caregiver, so if you are a caregiver in this call, hats off to you. Really, really admire the work that you do, right? Because there comes a lot of sacrifices. But if you are a caretaker, approach with caution, right? So don't leave me alone, right? That's the main idea. So don't sort of leave me and then I'll come back in 2 hours kind of thing. Like, be there, right? Be gentle and patient. Don't be noisy, right? But just be there. Slowly allow yourself to ask, hey, okay, I know you're going through a panic attack. Maybe we can do some breathing together, right? So deep breaths, right? It's always good to have deep breaths. And then later on, after the anxiety attack has passed, you can ask them, hey, I was there for you, but I kind of want to know what is this, right? Like, was this helpful? Did I approach too strong? Was I too anxious, or did I make you get triggered? That kind of thing. So it's a learning process for everyone. So whether it's, anxiety attacks or depressive episodes, you want to make it a learning process, because it's not a one shoe fits all kind of thing.
Okay. Luke, thanks so much. It is exactly 10 p.m. and we got to end here. I know there are a lot of unanswered questions. Unfortunately, we only have this small window for us. Really appreciate Hannah moderating this session, and many more questions as well, even on the Zoom chat channels we are not able to answer. I think if anyone wants to, will they be able to interact with you, Luke?
Yes, actually, so that's why I wanted to ask you actually right before, so I hope that's okay. I think I sort of went through the Slido quite a bit, and I don't know, my heart kind of just, it broke, because I saw quite a few questions that really touched the nerve of what I try and help people through. I'm not a therapist or anything, but it's just something that I have a lot of experience with, in terms of helping my friends and also myself. So I would think if you guys want to contact me, you guys can. I have an email, which is kind of weird, but I'll give you my email. I know we're all, WhatsAppers and all that, but there's a lot of you, and I don't know who will text me and, find out where I am. So I hope that's okay. It's not that I don't trust you guys. I'm sure you guys are all lovely people, but this is my email. And so if you want to send an email or anything like that, you can. If you want to get a hold of me, or see more stuff that I talk about, you can go to my Instagram page. I would think you can, that's another one. You can DM me on Instagram. It's called A Pocket Full of Grace.